Today is November the 28th. Were the soldiers responsible if they didn't understand what they were doing? Well, let's read from the book of Matthew and then add one verse from the book of Luke. Matthew 27:33 to 38. When they came to the place called Golgotha, which means place of a skull, they offered him wine to drink mixed with gall. When he tasted it, he wouldn't drink it. When they had crucified him, they divided his clothes among themselves by casting lots. Then they sat down there and kept watch over him. Over his head, they put the charge against him, which read, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." 2 rebels were crucified with him, one on his right, one on his left. And then we add from the book of Luke, Luke 23, verse 34. When they came to the place which is called the skull, they crucified Jesus there with the criminals, one on his right, one on his left. And Jesus said, "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing." Incredible story. Again, full of emotion for all of us who follow Jesus. First of all, they give him wine mixed with gall, according to Matthew. Mark specifies that a little bit more. It's wine mixed with myrrh. Now, myrrh was a narcotic agent. It would be given to those who are about to be crucified to dull some of the pain. When Jesus realizes what it is, he refuses it. Part of the reason why he refuses it, remember in the Last Supper, he has just said, "I will not drink again of the fruit of the vine." This was wine. He had just said less than 12 hours ago, "I won't drink wine again until the great feast in God's kingdom." But also, he refused the narcotic agent, I think because he wanted to be in full possession of his faculties, even though that meant excruciating pain. Then they took his clothing, they divided it, they cast lots for it. This is actually predicted in Psalm 22:18. Then Matthew says they put a plaque on the cross with his crime. The crime, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. And then Luke adds the words, "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing." Now, this is the first of what is traditionally known as the 7 words of Jesus on the cross. The oldest manuscripts don't actually include this verse. It's apparently begins to be included around the 5th or 6th centuries. However, if you look at Acts 3:17, 1 Corinthians 2:8, there Peter says in a sermon and Paul says in his epistle that those who crucified Jesus did so in ignorance. They did not know what they were doing. Personally, I think this is a historical statement of Jesus on the cross, which, may not have been part of Matthew or Luke's original Gospels, but it was added in at a later time, genuinely from the mouth of Jesus. They acted in ignorance. They didn't know what they were doing. So what does the Old Testament say about sins committed in ignorance? Well, let's read about that in Leviticus 5, verses 14 to 19.
Leviticus 5, verses 14 through 19, New Revised Standard Edition. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "When any of you commit a trespass and sin unintentionally against any of the holy things of the Lord, you shall bring as your guilt offering to the Lord a ram without blemish from the flock, convertible into silver by the sanctuary shekel. It is a guilt offering, and you shall make restitution for the holy thing in which you were remiss, and shall add 1/5 to it and give it to the priest. The priest shall make atonement on your behalf with the ram of the guilt offering, and you shall be forgiven. If any of you sin without knowing it, doing any of the things that by the Lord's commandment ought not to be done, you have incurred guilt and are subject to punishment. You shall bring the priest a ram without blemish from the flock, or the equivalent, as a guilt offering, and the priest shall make atonement on your behalf for the error that you committed unintentionally, and you shall be forgiven. It is a guilt offering. You have incurred guilt before the Lord.
There in the book of the law, Moses says, if you commit a sin in ignorance, you are still responsible. Now that's why Jesus said, forgive them. If they were not responsible for what they were doing, there would be no need to forgive them. Jesus says, no, they don't understand what they're doing, but they're still responsible. Forgive them, Lord. What do we do about this today? You know, as I look back at my life, I realize there were times when I committed sin in ignorance. I may have betrayed a trust, or perhaps I said something that I thought was true, but it ended up being a lie. I'm still responsible for those things. Look back at your own life. Take responsibility, even for sins committed in ignorance. Take them to the Lord. Scripture reading from the New Revised Standard Version by Herrera. If you like what you heard today, share it with your friends.